Jerry Styler.
Here.
Joel Samuelson.
Present.
Barry McManaway.
Present.
Do we have anybody online?
Nobody is online.
Okay.
Sorry, I kind of skipped over. Thank you for coming to the June 17th regular meeting for the Culver Plan Commission. If you are online or in the audience, if you choose to speak and when allowed to, please say your name and your address. You are being recorded, so participation is acknowledgement that you are being recorded and it will be watched later. All right? So let's all stand for pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Legal statement.
No.
Oh, very well. Good job. Good job.
May I have approval of the May 20th, 2025 minutes?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We don't have any hearings, so let's move on down to TRC review.
We did not have any TRC cases, but we will have one coming up before the next plan commission meeting. Because there will be next month, there will be a request for a zoning change.
Okay. Moving on to old business, new business. The resolution of the Town of Culver, Indiana Plan Commission approving a resolution of the Town of Culver, Indiana Redevelopment Commission approving certain amendments to the declaratory resolution and the economic development plan for the Culver Economic Development Area, establishing a residential housing program and all matters relating thereto. This is a little new. I was trying to piece through it.
If I may,
And
Kevin Dante, town manager. By the way, Barnes Thornburg get paid by the word, if you don't know that. Gentlemen, if I can distribute this to you, it might help the conversation a bit. What we're looking at is something, sounds complicated, it's quite easy.
Okay.
When we started with the dunes and we issued the bond, we created a TIP zone. That was the economic development. The economic development agreement during that time had allocated 2 areas. Now, an allocation area is a designated piece of land that's attached to collect TIP revenue. When we negotiated during the deal, originally the thought was we were going to have a single bond issuance. The developer asked for a market delay. So they're going to do what we call residential phase 1. They're building the 220 some odd homes, apartments. They wanted to pause to make sure the market was right before they continued in the second phase, which is going to be around approximately, I think, 78. Don't hold me to the numbers, please. Single family homes. It's the second part of it. We call it residential phase 2 development, and also been referred to as 3 and 4. When they did that, we decided we were going to separate the bond into 2 issuances. Issuance A, Bond A, commonly referred to in the Economic Development Agreement, and Bond B. Bond B was a conditional. It was for 1.5, I think, and some change. And we were going to hold back until we were convinced, number one, that the developer had followed through with residential area 1, which so far on track, and they're keeping their word. Things look good with the Ready project, and we're moving right along, and there seems to be a hot interest in it right now, I've been told. They're moving at a pace that we want to anticipate the issuance of Bond B. That doesn't necessarily mean it. Second reason we're asking for this tonight, Barnes and Thornburg reached out. The minute that we divided that bond into 2 separate issuances, in essence, one could argue that we created 2 bonds. The state has a very strict reading of statutory law that says a TIF allocation area can only have 1 bond attached to it. Somebody, if they interpreted it a certain way, could say that these actually represent 2 separate bonds on 1 allocation area. Barnes and Thornburg knocked on our door. Said, oh, good, we get to do this again. There's a series of processes that have to happen in order to make any changes to the original economic development agreement, and that's what we're currently in. The first change was with redevelopment. They approved it, they overlooked it, and it moved through. I do believe that was in May of this year. It was in May. I think 17th, if the memory serves well. That doesn't sound right, but first in May, they approved it, and now it comes to you. What you're doing tonight is you're just saying that you agree with the redevelopment authority to redevelop that, and that you agree that this allocation area is created for the issuance of bond B when that day comes. If you take a look at the map in front of you, the little green area down below is the parcel we're separating out. We call that TIF area 3. It's got the little marsh in it. It's not a wetland. It's a horrible graphic to use. But I want to make sure we understand that. That green area is going to be TIF area 3. That allocation area, 3. And that's going to be attached to bond B. And those monies collected off of that TIF will be designated for the payment of that bond. Again, this is a risk-free for the town because the developer has to generate income off of that. They're the ones at stake with the bond, not us. They're responsible for that payment, and they've been pledged the 80-20% split of TIF, just like in the first. This changes absolutely zero about the deal, other than we're creating this allocation area, ensuring that we are strict with state statute, and we have that separated from that bond. That's it. Redevelopment has passed it. We turn to you. Once it passes you, we're going to keep it through. There's a whole clock of this going through. We get to rehearse it again, and we'll move forward. And that's what we're doing, gentlemen. I know that's a lot, and there's a lot of words in that thing when you read a lot of whereases, but is there any questions that I can answer?
So basically it's set aside to phase B or phase
To whatever you want to
or
call
whatever,
it.
yeah. So if those phases end up not happening, then that bond's not going to be issued because it's tied to that one.
Well, yeah, we anticipate the issuance of the bond because they're moving through and the demand is good. And this is, with that income coming off of that area, it's more than satisfied. We ran the numbers with Baker Tilly. They wouldn't even have to fully develop the whole area, but there's an intention to develop that whole area into what they originally planned.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just designating that area as an allocation. It has always been in the TIF. We're just separating it from the first area. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what this,
Yes, sir.
and it only applies to this property that you're talking about.
That's correct. That's correct. It's just for this property. And what will happen when we create this allocation area, it goes in it's a residential TIF, so it goes into a 20-year collection cycle for that property. Okay.
So the only part that's going into the TIF is not the whole project.
Well, the whole project, actually, that's a great question. The whole project's in a TIF currently. What we're doing, what that green area was originally what we call Culver TIF 1. So that whole area is a TIF. From the yellow, you see the Dunes residential yellow?
Yeah.
That's what's currently being built right now.
Right.
That blue hash, green hash, that's a mix, that's Beachview, that's where the apartments are. That's commercial. That's a 25-year TIF, which is good. And then that green area is the new area that we're separating what was originally from the yellow.
Okay.
That would have been all yellow. And I apologize, that's a great question, but I didn't explain that. So that's what we're separating from the residential TIF 1 and creating TIF 3. 2 is the commercial. Okay,
Oh, okay.
thank you.
So, Kevin, my question is, and I just want to make sure I capture that
Yeah.
in the minutes. So does this resolution authorize then a second bond issue? They seem to say there was only one bond issue.
There was always, in essence, there was always going to be 2 bond issues.
Right, that's how I
Right.
remember.
And the question has become this: when we created the second issuance and calling it bond B, did we actually create a separate bond?
Okay,
Or just simply a separate issuance, a conditional issuance of the original agreement? And this is where the fancy, when Barnes and Thornburg explained it to me, they said that they're almost 85% to 90% sure there would be no issues. But if we get issues, it changes a lot of things down the line for us. And so we better safe than sorry. It's better to go through this process again and tighten it up.
so it'd be more accurate to say this is a second phase of the bond issue as opposed to like it's a separate bond issue.
At this point, Don, I would call it a second bond issue because that's
Okay.
essentially how we're treating it, with creating an allocation area. So that,
Since the minutes can be part of a record, I just
I agree.
be sure. Okay.
Yeah, we're referring to this as bond B. And the minute we do that, when we're not saying issuance of second issuance of A, that's where I think the language becomes problematic. So let's call it a bond B. Right? And that's how
Separating it.
That's how it's referred to in every legal document we have. We have a bond A, which was the first issuance, and we have it referred to as bond B, conditional upon the completion. That's right.
That way.
No financial responsibility to
Other than the 80-20 TIF split, that's the key. It has very I'll say zero risk. I'm always very hesitant to use that. That's how it's been explained, and that comes from the lawyers. And we're confident that this isn't putting any, it doesn't change the original agreement, Chester. So yeah,
And so if phase 3 is not developed,
if you're talking about the second, that
Yeah.
second residential isn't developed, there's never an issuance of this bond.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If they come forward, I think one of the keys, and full disclosure to you gentlemen, one of the keys that we have to confirm before we issue the bond is that the development is going to put enough development out there to ensure not only the payment of the bond, but also TIF funds coming back in for infrastructure development. Don't forget that when they develop, it is also consuming infrastructure that currently exists. And we need to replace that, improve it, and make sure that we're being responsible to it. So we're looking for that. There is no indication at all that they're not going to develop this area. With the infrastructure they're currently putting in out there and the plans that they have, it looks like they're looking at the full 70.
of the
full 75.
Explains a lot.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work going on to leave it blank.
Yeah.
I want to make sure it's done in a timely fashion. That's a conversation that will happen, but I think it's going to be an easy conversation when we get there. But there will be a conversation before we issue this bond.
I thought they were relatively set earmarkers or time.
We did put restrictions on the time. They're on a clock. So this is not a deal that goes perpetually. They have an X amount of time to complete. And if they're not there, then we're pulling out. There is no reason to believe that. It is, we're moving along and it seems to be quite, there's still the town pushback and there's still some disagreement whether or not it should, but every indicator is telling us that they're moving forward at a really nice rate. It's going to provide that housing. So we'll see. But again, understand that this does not necessitate bond B. It just allows for the bond B and it creates the allocation area for it.
Without the legal stamp.
Right. But there's every indication that bond B is going to be issued. Anything else, gentlemen?
I have other questions about development, but it's.
That's over coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would love to entertain them, because I think that there's still a lot of questions and we'll work through them. All right.
Actually, if you would be so kind.
Yeah.
Depending on what we have next month, just come in and give us like a 10-minute rundown of how everything's going.
100%. If you guys don't mind too, I'm putting together for the council. I think I'd like to extend the offer to all of our commissions. A planned portfolio for 25 of what we're doing in town, including water plant, sewer plant, or wastewater plant, excuse me. Every project that we have going, I'd like to put it in front of you guys, keep your eyes on it. And see if there's
That's actually what I was gonna ask you about.
100%. Yep. Great. I appreciate the fact that you recognize it. And yeah, I'm sorry to offend you, but I never thought about extending the invite of that plan. I'm doing it under the request of Bill Clevenger, but I think it's something that'd be great for you guys to do.
I think it would.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the board was questionable whether that before, but not having enough information, so I think this would be good.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
I would just add, for example, looking at the CRC agenda, town council agenda, means this is the body that's charged with implementing the comprehensive plan. It would be good to know all of that.
Exactly.
An overall briefing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's come up quite, as we move towards downtown development, there's a conversation I think that you gentlemen want to be involved in. And we're looking at downtown development. And to Don's point, the comprehensive plan has to be an instrumental part of that in terms of triaging priorities and understanding current situations. And the comprehensive plan does an amazing job of outlining that. And we provided that comprehensive plan to a company. We provide that comprehensive plan to a company that's doing we're asking to kind of put together an RFP for a consulting firm for downtown development.
Mhm.
So we definitely leaned heavy on the comprehensive plan and sent that to them.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, so, any questions anybody have about this?
I think they're pretty good.
Well, then I'm willing to entertain a motion to. Go ahead.
Your motion should be to approve resolution number 2025-001.
All right,
You got that?
yes, resolution number.
Okay. So move.
Second, 2025 is also.
Yeah. 5-0. We have a first and a second.
I make the motion that we approve the resolution.
Oh, we got a third.
Oh, they first and second.
All
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
right.
Aye. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Motion carries.
I'm starting having to do that, so it's done tonight.
So.
Good enough.
Would you like me to pass this around down to sign, or do you want to do it after the meeting?
Pass it around now. 'Cause we're-
I would ask that our secretary sign it last.
Okay.
Because he's attesting to it.
Sure.
Secretary's attesting to it.
I would also, if there's any future or questions that come up after this or anything that you guys want to know, please reach out through email. I'll be happy. Trust me when I say this, I have a very, I like to think I have an understanding of it,
Yeah.
but there may be some technical things that I might miss or not be able to represent correctly. I always want to try to do my best to do that for you guys. So if something doesn't ring or there's an issue, please don't hesitate. I'll get the right answers for you from the experts. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Moving on, review rules and procedures. Let's check.
I don't have
Okay.
anything else under review.
Oh, we're still, yeah, we're just on B and.
So B for review rules and procedures, Mr. President. Last month when this was discussed, it was recommended there's additional comments to have them in by the 10th. Give me a week to process. I don't have any additional comments for this.
Okay.
I'd note if people like it, you can approve it.
Mhm.
It's not an ordinance. You have the ability to, at a meeting, to change it anytime you, this body so chooses to do so, to amend it, to add to, take away.
Just add what the commissioner said too, we will find
Thank you.
maybe some things that we do this procedure
Mhm.
that we might want to as far as improve with.
Yeah, something that might find a hiccup later.
I mean, being my past experience with that, we found things going on here. I think it's a difference.
Do we want to go ahead and just run through the rules and procedures or does?
But I've had a chance to read them.
Same as we were last month.
It's unchanged.
It's not changed from last time.
If you approve it, the very last paragraph that just talks about the Indiana code, I'd probably take that off there. It's there just as a reference for everybody.
The one, the whole space one?
Yeah, at the very end, rules of procedure or documented procedures, starts with that sentence on top, the very last paragraph.
So you're excluding it or moving
Excluding it. Excluding it, you said.
it?
It was just a note.
We could leave it. I mean, it's,
I was excited.
It's not gonna matter, I guess.
Are you going to entertain a motion, as they say in the trade?
Yes.
I move the adoption of the Colbert Plan Commission rules and procedures with the omission of the paragraph in the last page beginning rules of procedure.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries. And
okay, thank you.
rules and procedures.
We're sipping along.
Yeah, before the sun goes down.
The sun goes down at 11 o'clock, right?
Yeah, Yeah, I'm usually.
Okay, the next part will be up to you all along the last.
The ordinance update?
It is. So really wanted to do, we can call it touch base if you want, here where I'm at with updating, and this is strictly Article 3 of our zoning ordinances, and this is the section that we go to for S1, for R1, R2, and we look at what the setbacks are, we look at all the different restrictions that we have. It also has in those sections what we can acceptable use and special use in there, or permitted uses, I'm sorry, and special uses. So I just wanted to go over some of the things. A lot of this is corrections or conflicts that are within the ordinances themselves that create problems for me. Some of it's clarification, and some of it's going to have to be discussed by this body here and what you want. If I may, I'd just like to go through, to start with on the first page, S1, and just go through the whole thing and explain it, and then take questions, if that works.
Yep.
Okay, so for S1, which is suburban residential district, the maximum structure height says 35 feet. This references dwellings, homes is what's meant by this. And then it says accessory buildings are 50 feet. So in agriculture, A1, the maximum height of the building is 35 feet. I'm going to recommend that the max height for accessory structures in the S1 district also be 35 feet. Now, the reason for the 50 feet height is because of the academy is in S1 district, and they have structures that go taller than that. I think we can, I'll address that further down. And another conflict we have with that is in Article 6, Section 280, it's on page 127, 35-foot height restriction, all zoning districts. Culver, Indiana zoning ordinance contains a section as follows. That's a paragraph A. Size regulations. No building shall hereafter be erected, reconstructed, or structurally altered to exceed 35 feet in height from the natural or pre-existing grade, which conflicts with what we currently have for S1 at the 50 feet. So I'm going to put this together in a cleaner form for you, but I want to go over it now. Also, I have some issues have come up on a regular basis about at what point do we measure that 35 feet maximum? I would propose that we're going to measure that from the peak of the roof and not include cupolas, chimneys, exhaust vents for your bathroom, whatever that may be. That's the standard practice in most zoning ordinances that I've looked at.
You say from the peak of the roof, but you're talking about.
We're going to measure the maximum height to 35 feet to the peak of the roof,
But starting at grade or
starting at grade.
Starting at. grade
Yes,
Established.
at the step. Yes. Yeah. Very good question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just like
Yeah.
that in there, just put a 35-foot to
So-
the peak.
So when so again, these,
Which peak?
so these are notes, but that's a great question. When you see this spelled out, I'll make sure that you see the actual ordinance with the changes then in there too. So you can see what it was and what it is. It does add a different perspective, and I didn't put all the information on here,
I mean,
but it's a great question.
That's
Yes.
an elevated lot, talking, where do you measure from?
We have options.
and that's what I was going to
It's
say.
determined before.
Our ordinance, it depends on circumstances and situation. Our ordinance allows us 2 or 3 different ways to determine where grade is at, depending on if it's an existing structure, it's getting torn down and rebuilt, or if we're just starting from a fresh piece of ground. In most cases, from a fresh piece of ground, you would take imagine a square foundation and you put it corner to corner and an X across it. That center point is your grade. So it'll be lower here, it'll be higher here, but that center point will be your grade.
Right now.
That's one way to do it. If we're rebuilding a house, just one, I'll mention one other way. If we're rebuilding a house, the contractor and I will talk and based on our ordinances, and we'll determine where to set the grade. There's a few options inside of that option. So for instance, we had a case where the option is to put it at the beginning of the driveway.
Yeah.
So we decided to put a grade at the beginning. And when I say we, I work with the contractors on this. They get say so on this too. So we decided that right at the beginning of the driveway was where the grade is. And then you have to put stakes in to mark it. There's a whole bunch of process to making sure that the grade is established, and then you maintain a marker somewhere of where that grade was at.
Prior to tearing down the old house.
Or prior to construction of a new, completely
Prior,
something
I
new.
mean, I do know that prior to the existing structure, it should be established prior to tearing down, because
That's correct.
we avoid contractors come in, tearing down, and they grade whatever they want to, and they can actually establish their own grade.
So, but, back on this, is in many cases though, Culver's actually unique, from what everything I've seen, I've looked at a lot of ordinances to measure to the top of a chimney or a vent or something sticking out of the roof. The vast majority of places I've seen measure to the roof peak. And then in some cases, though, your chimney has to go higher than the peak to properly vent. So if I'll put that in there, that will ultimately be this board's decision, if you like it or not.
Okay.
But it certainly makes it more clear and standardized on it.
Right.
Then underneath, an S1 under permitted uses. I'm just throwing this out there. Single family residential is a permitted use. Adding a note that only one dwelling per parcel. I'll get to more of that later, but as we go down here. None of our ordinances say one dwelling per parcel. Our one could have potentially, if they fit. If your family and the husband wants to live in one house and the wife wants to live in the other house and you're not renting them. I mean, it's unlikely, but I'd like it to be clear.
I'd like it to be put in there. Though.
And then I'll say this now, but in all of these under permitted uses, it's already happening. It's all over town. I want it to be clear. Again, it'll be up to you, but short-term rentals being permitted uses. There's a lot of people that have a house that rent it out for the weekend and they leave town or for a week. I think it ought to be clear that that's okay.
I thought it was already being done.
We don't really have anything in our ordinances that addresses short-term rentals.
No, we didn't have anything to stop it either.
No, there's nothing to stop it. Again, it's less ambiguous if with a little more detail. on it.
Yeah, but also bring us into compliance with state law too.
So it would be good to have that if there's permitted. Under special uses, here comes the special uses. Back to that second dwelling. It may be a special use if the BZA grants it, if it meets, and I put meet setback requirements. And then also, under special uses, in S1 is a 60-foot maximum height structures for educational campus buildings to include dormitories and other structural specific for educational campuses. Is what's wanted to, I probably clean language up a little bit, but the whole point of that would be strictly for the academy and their
School as well. I mean, I know we were talking about that prior to you being here and stuff, but we were looking at the institutional zoning
and
to cover school and the academy.
that,
Also hold everything
I'm sorry.
to the campus as far as the academy, because as far as just going to the academy for whatever, they own property in town and out of town, well, not necessarily on campus.
Yep, that's why I want to be very specific, so that use is there. Other things then wouldn't have to be considered by the BZA.
So does that refer to, we're talking about dwelling places on campuses? I'm thinking, for instance, of the chapel, to take the easy case, which is way the hell more than 60 feet tall.
Yeah, it could actually be considered grandfather, they get to that point, but you've got more buildings other than just dorms.
Yeah.
As well.
I get the point. I'll try to put some language in.
Yeah,
there for-
again,
Are there any 60-foot buildings there right now? Pardon? Are there any 60-foot buildings they can?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I mean, we actually did for the last structure that was the ball field. Yeah.
How tall's the
Oh, the auditorium?
40,
I'd say 50.
70.
Of course, that was built pre-zoning ordinance, but I think with modern ordinance, Shaw would have been the last one, and I think Shaw, it'd be interesting, like, how do you count the cupola on Shaw? Because I think the tippy top of that's 75 feet.
My answer is,
I mean, there's the roof.
Tell us everything we need to know right there, yeah.
So,
Probably the roof though. would be some-
and I would say that 60 foot was just a number I pulled out of the air. I know 50 wasn't enough.
Yeah.
But, and to John's point too, I could ask for chapels, places for religious services, something language.
Would be.
Isn't new. Well, the Methodist Church, to take a non-academy example, Methodist Church steeple maybe more than 60 feet tall. I don't know. Anyway,
Maybe
yeah.
throw in things like steeples in addition to your example with cupolas and chimneys.
Separate ordinance district or separate zoning for that, then issues would come up in favor.
And some of the churches are not going to be in S1. A lot of them in town are going to be.
Oh, right, yeah, right,
Yeah,
a different area, right, good point.
But I'm making a note on here because it's all good stuff. Okay, and then to move on, retail sales and service. All this, I did put all this is already listed. But the one thing that came up very recently in an S1, and this is totally thrown out, would golf cart sales and service be something that should be a special use?
What would be a special use?
So it already, right above it, you're allowed law, because these are all special use, because it's still suburban S1.
Mhm.
So lawnmower sales and service you can do,
Yeah.
and it's like,
But there's a difference.
if you could work on a lawnmower, why can't you work on a golf cart? We're not talking working on cars and trucks and
No,
in this case, even boats, it's just adding golf carts.
but honestly, I mean, my opinion, we discussed this too, but I thought golf carts and lawnmowers were a little different because within our town, you're permitted use of a golf cart on the streets, which is a safety issue as well. But when it comes to doing that, you're allowing somebody to just go work on lawnmowers.
So to Barry's point, the ordinance, I don't always like it, but the ordinance says that if there is a similar use, it's up to the building commissioner to decide if it falls into that category or not. So I've been approached on other things in the past, and typically if it's not specific, I don't like to just say, well, it sounds close enough to that.
Yeah.
Under their opinion, without.
Those situations could come up, but I'd like to minimize those as much as possible. So it's not up to me or any building commissioner that they're given it to be subjective to. I think it's okay for you. What happens to the next person? Well, not you. I like black and white stuff, to be clear. So that's why I put that in there. Any thoughts on having that in there? Again, this is an S1.
I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. You got Gavin Cattell, probably 400 registered golf carts in town, and it's just kind of
More.
normalizes
I'd have to go look at the number, but I know it's a lot higher.
get
than that.
around. Is it?
I won't say four.
It's at least 650.
Wow. Pardon?
At least 650.
Yeah, I think it's up to 600.
Be more than people soon.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Wait till the gyms open.
well, that might help traffic,
It might be good.
unless you're in a hurry.
They could do the speed limit.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Mine does the speed limit.
We could create special lanes for them.
It's like 20 miles an hour. is good speed.
Okay, I'll move on to L1.
Yeah, sidetrack.
We did, but it's a good conversation. Okay, L1, the Lake District. Again, on this one, we have a minimum dwelling size of 1,600 square feet and then one dwelling allowed per parcel. And you'll see down below that we'll address that in special use. Minimum front yard setbacks. You guys ready to have a conversation about this tonight, or want me to do the others?
Go for it.
And front yard is the part closest to the lake, right?
Front yard.
Anyway,
The front yard is the lake side
thank you.
on L1, unless you're not on the lake.
So if I'm across the road, then it's what it would usually be.
So if somebody happened to be across the road and they were zoned L1, their front yard would be the roadside.
Got it. Thank you.
Cause we've had that before. That was an issue that was brought up several years ago.
So right now, our front yard setback, the lakeside, and Lake Maxinkuckee at 735.48 feet. And on Lost Lake, Little Max, all the other names it has, it's 733.05 feet is the high water mark, and then we measure 25 feet back from the high water mark. However, in this,
You bring it up, you're talking about, just like for the Academy Forest stuff. I mean, we've discussed, and I kind of like the idea as well, separate like L2 for the whole place, since it's not residential. I mean, I think that ought to be looked at because most of the Hawk Lake, you're restricted to, 25 feet from the high water mark, which in some places is the road, which would be unbuildable. But that's cool with me on that part. But
well, high water mark is based on the highest level which a flood could happen.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't want people building in the high water area. Because then floodplain isn't the right word for it, but for your 100 or 500 year floods.
and I know we've got residences that are on the east side. And their front yard is on that lake, or the front yard the other way, like on the West Circle. I'm not sure how that was ever classified.
So it says in our ordinance, if it's on the lake, your front yard's the lake side. If you're not on the lake, then it's the road.
Yeah, I'm not sure how were they built. I mean, we've got a bunch up there grandfathered in now, or what? I just don't know what process they used at the time.
Okay, so here it comes. Where the property immediately adjacent on either side of the lot is already developed with principal structures, the required setback shall be determined by a line drawn between the furthest extension of the adjacent structures, including any decks or raised patios. I wish I had a paper to flip and mark up on there. So here's what we run into on this. With this part of the ordinance, I understand why it was put in. It was put in to protect some existing homes' views.
Draw a line. Lines are beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah, it gets crazy.
Well, one of the Vonnegut cottages has a deck
The line should
over
be
the lake, right? Or at least right up the edge of the lake.
It's been a huge challenge for me
right.
working with mostly the architects designing these places to find that point, a deck by the lake and a house back here. So now you got a steep angle, or you got a house back here and you have a house 40 feet back and a house 30 feet back. So now you have a line here. So this house that wants to build in between doesn't get to use that 25-foot setback. Now they're at 35 foot or more setback from that. A deck, raised patio, some of the old boat houses. It's could be a challenge,
Oh, yeah.
and frankly, it's subjective in some cases
Yeah.
So that's
for a
what
best
you're saying.
guess of what point you use.
So help me
Well-
out, just on the, just as it's written, never mind anything else. If Don's house is closer to the lake and your house is less close to the lake, and I'm in between, this line is going to be running at an angle.
And it's gonna be
Right.
established where you can put it.
But what part, is it where it crosses the center line of my property? Is it where it crosses the right-hand edge of my property, where it crosses the left-hand edge of my property?
So
Because obviously those are three different places.
great
You still
question.
meet your setbacks, so as far as
But what I'm saying is that it's three different setbacks depending on where that diagonal line crosses my property.
Right.
It's crossing at a diagonal.
But no matter where you put that house, you can't cross that line.
Right,
Basically.
right. So, but in that case, it's always going to be his house. It doesn't, there's no reason to have a diagonal because I can't be closer than his house.
That's
He's in
correct.
Don's house. Yeah.
That is
So
correct.
the diagonalness of it
But
is
I'd like
irrelevant.
to bring up a point on that too, as far as that ordinance goes. You've got an ordinance that you cannot be any closer than 25 feet from the high water mark,
Right.
all right? And so you can build it within 25 feet of that high water mark. But you've got another ordinance within the same guidelines that says you cannot build it in front of a line that's drawn between the two properties.
Right. So I
You've got one ordinance conflicting the other ordinance. I mean, when you create a conflict between two ordinances, it's gonna create a variance for one.
It's gonna create a job for lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, at best, it should say the nearest, or whichever you wanted to put it, either nearer of the two or the farther of the two, whichever way you wanted to phrase it. But
Well, I mean.
yeah,
we had the
clearly,
home
just
at
sitting
the-
there is problematic.
We had one right corner, but,
I'll say 25 feet. I don't
and
care.
that house had to be
Period.
back far enough that required a side yard variance before they could put the house where it was made to be according to that ordinance.
So to John's point, why don't we just say 25 feet and be done?
Exactly.
Because that'll
Do
irritate
away
both the
with
property
your
owners on the other side.
Do away
Because-
with the line because the lake is not straight.
You could imagine, because the example we had here, this is the lake, that creates one situation of the line in the middle of the lake.
Yeah.
But if you're the property owner and your property juts into the lake, you could end up with a completely unbuildable lot with this
Exactly.
line thing.
Requiring, yeah, it won't be
Yeah,
buildable, but you can't build it without a variance, right? You can't conform to the ordinance.
I mean, we don't have any equivalent for anything on near dry land. Right? If you're on a curved street, well, you're on a curved street.
Right.
So why don't we?
If that line allows the property to be built closer than the 25-foot setback, the 25-foot setback is the rule.
That's minimum.
It has to be
Yeah.
back.
Oh, yeah, no question about that.
It has to be back
I agree.
from there.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then otherwise you go from house to house and use that line as setback as long as it's
It's at least 25 feet.
Yeah, that one's good. That one's written pretty solid.
Right.
I have another example that just came up where I have a house on one side that's building, somebody wants to build on their lot. And the next house is probably at least 400 yards away.
Sure.
Hmm.
So that's,
That was what we got into before. wasn't it?
Yeah.
So if you take that literally, I'm going across a cove in the lake to find another house, to find where that line should
Well,
be.
I've got an additional problem to this too, is what I see, because if us three own the lot, each three lots. Now, this one's not built yet. I haven't built mine, but Joel builds his and he goes 20, whatever he wants. In other words, you got a choice, build it anywhere from 25 foot back. He's got what he wants to build on his lot. He does the same thing. He decides he wants his back 40 feet, 80 feet from the 25 foot line. I come up, now, I want to build mine on the lake. I don't want no giant front yard, but by our ordinances, I'm required to keep mine back 60 feet or whatever.
Whatever, yeah, whatever.
I don't have that option to build.
Right.
Where they wanted to. In
Yeah,
other words, they
exactly.
had the option to build where they wanted to. I don't have that option anymore because of our ordinance.
We could actually force people to the point where they have to get a rear yard or road yard variance
Because they, right,
because of this
we
rule.
push them back.
That has happened. That has already happened.
So I wanted to throw that out there and get everybody's opinion. If you want me to put a line through that one when I draft these up and see where it goes.
Put a stake
25
through its
feet.
heart.
I mean, that's to protect the lake, and I think that's what we need to protect.
Yep.
the lake.
yeah, we don't have to protect the neighboring property owners.
We shouldn't have a
If
different
they
option,
wanted more view, they should have bought another lot.
you know. Well, if you look in the book, there's no wording or views anywhere.
No, no,
I
no.
agree, But it's the principle that's been
But you
started, yeah.
I mean, it's called a site. Point A to point B, a line. That's not anything to do with you.
It doesn't
No,
say,
no, I
it
said-
doesn't say.
I only said view because I was guessing.
No,
why we had-
and that's how we have to
I'm glad.
refer to it.
I'm glad you did, because a lot of people use that as an argument why they should be able to do.
But no, I'm in favor of 25 feet and be done with it.
I do.
Yeah, because, I mean, if. Think about Long Point, suppose Long Point didn't have a house on it right now. That lot would not be, you couldn't build anything, and that's just wrong.
Do we need to vote to amend that? Or
Not yet.
Okay,
What I'm going to do is I'm getting your opinions today. And I'm gonna write it up much more formally like the solar ordinance was.
Okay.
Strike this is here, strike this, add this, and this parts. Okay, just a side note too, if you're in an S1 district, and I just had this, on East Shore Drive is state highway in S1 district, front yard setback is 50 feet or 85 feet from the center line of the highway, whichever is greater. Now, East Shore Drive
That's been.
is a state highway.
5 years, why they've never been applied for that.
So I'm glad that's not in L1, but just throwing that out there.
But I mean, how do you correct that?
That's something we can talk about,
Yeah.
but 50 feet from your property line in an S1 is really good to get you off the state highway. I'm not sure why you have the option of 85 feet from the center line.
Yeah.
I mean, it's strange to measure those two distances. A lot of times the 85 feet, because it's a narrow highway,
Mhm.
is a greater distance than the 50 feet from your property line.
And if you remember the property that the house that we built over across Ken at the school, they were enforced to make that setback,
Because they were, because of across from State Road 10.
state road.
Got it.
So it's just interesting. And then also in L1, maximum impervious lot coverage, it's supposed to be there, it's 50%, but in the book it got cut off. So I want to make sure it's in there, that's why it's here. It's a correction, if you will, but it's a typo maybe, but I want to call them all out. Permitted uses, I'm sorry, the solar stuff's already covered, so we scratch that line out. And then permitted uses in L1, I put short-term rental too, because it's already happening.
Right.
And then under special uses, I didn't add anything else. Those are just special uses that are already listed.
Are you still saying that for it's one property on that, it's gonna be all,
Can you repeat that,
all
please?
zones? Zoning
For,
for R1, R2, whatever.
for short-term rental?
No. Far as those two properties on the same property.
Single-family
well,
residence.
Dwellings on the same.
It can't be an R2 because R2 is already multifamily, so you can put multiple structures in an R2. So that's already, it would apply to the rest, but not R2 because R2 already allows for multiple
Right.
structures.
But I mean, this one will be restricted to one dwelling on the property.
But it would be put in there as a special use if it fits within the setbacks.
If I have an apartment over my garage and I'm living next to the lake, does that count as a second dwelling?
It depends on how it's built.
The answer is yes, it does. However, a lot of that was,
Again, grandfathered in.
yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah, those-
That's honestly, as far as I know,
Yeah, no, understood. I would, the example I was thinking of was a house with 1,000 candles, which is clearly grandfathered in, but that's what.
But there's, several homes that we got the same way. and it Can't change what's in there.
Yeah, I think it was probably the done thing, to have a place to put your maid or your,
Yeah.
where it was, your chauffeur.
It just depends on.
little carriage house things.
Yeah, carriage house things, yeah. Exactly.
And frankly, a lot of them look nice.
Yeah.
Okay, R1, same thing. Minimum dwelling size, and then note only one dwelling allowed per parcel.
Correct.
And then under permitted uses, first of all, again, this is just me thinking out loud on paper. But manufactured homes, which is a mobile home. That's the correct terminology now. Do you want them in town in R1 or not? Currently, we have a ordinance that says no mobile home parks in corporate limits. But it does have a part somewhere in the ordinance that says for emergency and temporary use. For instance, a
Right.
tornado came through and we need to put those in. Other than that, though, I'll leave it or take it out. It's really, type B, by the way, is explained in our definitions. It's double wide.
No,
Some of them are pretty darn nice, by the way.
They are. I own one years ago.
Currently is that plot of ground across from Sand Hill Farms still an R1? Susie's lot, the old,
Where there used to be a
The old
trailer
mobile
park,
home park,
Yeah.
Come at the old trade port.
it's still zoned R1.
without looking at, I don't know off the top of my head. I looked at it several times. I just went blank on it.
Okay.
So I want to say for sure.
I think it's R1 on the trade.
It's been-
Probably R1, but I don't say.
It's been vacant for so long, I wasn't sure.
Well, it has a new owner,
Oh, it does.
relatively new owner,
Oh,
and he is making decisions on what he wants to do with the property.
well, that's.
So I guess real quick,
Town limits now.
yeah, that is.
Town limits are-
Yeah. So do you want us to stay or go? I'm not here or there on it.
I think you can stay.
Now, the reason it could maybe be moved, well, it's in special uses. If we take it off of permitted uses, we'll have it. I should have highlighted that, but I put it in special uses. So the BZA can decide, because a lot of times when you put a home in town, you want it to kind of look nice in the neighborhood.
Mhm.
Or go along with the neighborhood, I guess. So,
I'm happy.
you want permitted or just special?
I'll leave it special.
I lean towards special.
Yeah.
Because I think that, I mean, I'm guessing that there are manufactured homes out there that unless we knew, we would never know,
Exactly.
right? It could be the same thing as a modular construction.
Right.
But then you could also bring in one that's 35, 40 years old and put it on cinder blocks.
So,
And
so I'd have to go back and look.
I think if you left it that, it would be too many arguments one way or the other.
yeah,
I think it would be over for
Well, the other thing, I was discussing this actually with my father just the other night, if how it is mounted on the ground or onto a base or a foundation could also dictate how it's going to be processed. 'Cause if it's going to be on cinder blocks, it would be classified as a different thing as opposed to being put on a,
Not necessarily,
not necessarily.
because they're built on a trailer frame and they're designed to have axles attached to them and a hitch to pull them. So even if you set it on blocks, it's still a manufactured house.
But if you took that frame off of it, so it is completely immobile.
You can't take.
You can't.
You can take out the axle.
take an axle wrap, you can't
The frame is part of that.
I wasn't sure if how they
Right.
changed technology, if they made it so it's,
But when you.
No, then you get, that's more
Right.
modular.
Yes. that's what-
Yeah.
But if you pour a foundation, wouldn't necessarily whatever, but if you poured a foundation for that manufactured home
Mhm.
and put it on the cinder blocks, whatever you have it on whatever. So it would still be a structure,
It'd still be a manufactured home
it's still be a manufactured home, but it's still. Be
because it was built on a trailer frame and you can still pick it up and tow it away.
I was gonna say, do we have any sort of rule that they have to be tied down? I mean, in.
There's
the
state
tornado
state
thing?
code,
State code like that.
there's some state codes that, how to anchor them. For instance, the tongue, when that comes off of those, that has to be kept with it. So most people just have them underneath. Oh, yeah. You have to keep
I
it.
knew years ago,
That's
that's places
serious.
where the tongue
Yeah.
had to come off.
There's a lot of state code around those that came a
Yeah.
long ways.
And in Kentucky, there had to be, the tongue had to be,
They're removed, but they're put up, the people put them underneath them. You have to keep it with it.
oh, right? Because out there you could do away with whatever. Because it was established.
I could run with that, but
Yeah, I know, yeah.
I'll let that go. So, okay, so I'll take it off of permitted and put it on special, and then you can review it again.
Yeah.
And then also to the note, I made a note, what about pulling the 40-year-old one in? I know the county's got an ordinance, we'll copy that. There's a year limit on which you can do. If it's ever so many years old, you can no longer put it in place.
I think Fulton County can.
So you can't put a 1960 mobile home on a lot.
Um,
You'll have to
you mean
be,
the next day?
so if it's 2025, it can't be older than I'll just make up a number, 10 years.
Okay,
Anything older, you can't do.
that's fair.
You have to have a responsible growth figure.
And then in R2, on the backside, I just add short-term rental again to that one, to the permitted uses. And then that's it for that. In C1 commercial, the C1 commercial district is, it says specifically created for, but I don't know why I have to have specifically in there. So just my thought, created for the benefit of the downtown because of the new, this language has changed because of our new comprehensive plans language. Yeah, thank you for that. For the downtown, midtown, and the entertainment corridors on portions of North Main Street, South Main Street, and East Lake Shore Drive,
Sensible.
which would just brings it in line with the comprehensive plan.
The naming convention.
Yes. It's designated to encourage the growth of, instead of downtown, it's generic, these areas with an S. I didn't need to relist them all again. So, and then on the buffering between C1, any property line abutting a residential district shall be required to be effectively screened in with one of the following ways: dense strip of natural plantings or by a solid or opaque fence. Was a misspelling on that.
So basically, I understand why it's in there, but what would happen to somewhere like behind the lake house? Because it's on the strip, it's only got the alley and both businesses, the business and the apartments kind of bleed out into the alley. Where are they going to put that kind of buffer strip, or is it only on the sides?
I think that's a great question.
Good question, yeah.
I'm gonna make a note on that.
Because the other thing is it being an apartment complex, it itself is a business. So then on the outside of them, butting up to an actual housing across the street,
Yeah. And maybe the answer is unless separated, abutting a residential district unless separated by a street. but-
yeah, that's
Or
right. And
street or alley, but anyway, yeah, getting into the weeds, there you go. No pun intended.
Yeah, there was a fence between them and Rockies. I don't know if it's all still there. It's kind of written out.
I like that. No
There,
separate.
there's I walked the dog past it.
Good.
And I remember a Subway in the parking lot area used to have kind of a fence between the houses that sat there. But I think the houses liked when the fence went down because they could see more.
No, that's why I bring it all up. Okay, C2 commercial district. Pretty much the same, any property line abutting a residential district shall be required to be screened in the following ways. And then I'll put in an unless statement in there. And then on C2, permitted uses. The stuff that originally just said automotive, truck, motorcycle, dealer, service, repair. And this is one of those things where it would have came to me and said, well, what's the difference between me working on my car or working on a boat in, again, a commercial district now, or me working on a truck or a golf cart or an ATV or an RV. Since it's all commercial, if somebody has the room and space, it makes sense to me. Why not make sure we list the things that, in my experience, have already come up in questions about? And then instead of the word automobile below that, it's just more general language on there to cover everything. That was my thought behind that stuff. And that covers all sales, selling, sales, service, etc. And the intent here is just to clean this up and simplify the language, and again, be more specific on what we say is okay. Any questions on that? And then in the I-1 district, industrial district, it's got wind energy conservation systems. I would very much, I'm going to work on the definition for this for a couple reasons, but it's so generic. And our definition in the book doesn't quite cover everything because we had to give a variance to Mr. Hermanson to build a farm windmill, like you saw on every farm years ago. Every farm had one to pump water. He had to get a variance to put one of those on his property. It wasn't there to generate electricity. It wasn't, its purpose was, I have to look at some other definitions, but I want to make the definition more so that if somebody, it looks right, it looks really good on property too. It looks right on farm property to me.
My granddad had one where Chet Marshall's house is.
So I'll work on that and I'll present that definition to you that's clarified on some of those things. It was just made too broad. The original intent, I'm told, when that was written was to exclude those things. However, in the definition, it wasn't excluded.
I remember that.
I do remember that too.
But it's under A, I mean, to me, to have something like that, you should never have to get variance or something like that. But,
No
but,
electricity.
but the other side of it too, though, I mean, if you subdivide the property from and rezone it, and it happens to be that zone, then now you've got a structure, even though the grandfather in, but still have
But there's no way to foresee all
no
that.
foresee. I mean, all ordinance are for foreseeing as well. But
I agree with that, but I'll clean up definition and you all can look at it again. And if you like it, fine. If you want changes, fine. That's what I'm here for. And industrial two, same thing. I just wanted that mentioned in there. I want to make sure we're defining what this actually means. In some cases, it's going to mean, certainly in these cases, it means for energy production.
Right.
And then even in our definition, and I don't see anywhere else in the book where it says, if you want to put a 100-foot tall one in, it's could go down a rabbit hole with it. So I want it to be clear ahead of time. And then in parks, I just want, they can take it off or add that definition, leave it in there with them for our parks. I'm just kind of like,
yeah, that one, you'd have to look at it.
I think it could stay if we have the right definition. Okay.
Now, we have more.
We do. One more.
He's
And then-
filled with despair.
And then for
I
the
was going to ask about agricultural, actually.
for the manufacturing housing, we can just scratch that wind energy. Or no, that's gonna be the same thing.
Yep.
Definition, so. And then ag, the only, I really didn't have anything in ag at this time. Our ag's pretty open. It's nice to keep it that way.
Well, that was the one question I was going to have. It's going back to the height restrictions of auxiliary structures only being a minimum or maximum of 35 feet. It's going to be hard with equipment size it is. If somebody buys that plot of ground at the end of the high school and they want to put a barn on it, put their combine in, can almost be.
Yeah, I don't think,
I don't think there's a
I don't
limit
think,
on
I don't think there's a limit on it right now.
Yeah, that,
I'd have to look in the book. I didn't put it on here.
that came up in comprehensive plan, public meetings, I recall, because there were farmers who were like, well, if the zoning boundary were expanded, wouldn't that impact us? The
That was
conversation was, well, you're A1,
6 years ago,
because they're like, could I put up silo? Yeah, of course you could.
So
It's just
like 5 or 6 years ago.
in fact, our agriculture zoning regulations are not as strict as the counties.
Right.
Yeah.
It probably would benefit some of the farmers to have our zoning.
I'm gonna say the opposition sort of died down once we had a conversation about. The only thing that would change is you come to the Culver instead of going to Plymouth. Yeah, because the restrictions are actually less.
And the last thing I had, and I know it's actually a relatively short list, but when you see it written out, it's a lot longer. But the last thing I have on here is we have the tables in our book also. And in those tables, it's really identified with the number one, but there's a reference point. This was under for lakes. It's measured from the road or street right of way, or not just for lakes, but for frontage.
Mhm.
Or on a lake, the front yard is the lakeside. I kept reading this and reading this. It could be the roadside,
Yes.
but typically it's the lakeside. So when you, especially when I first got here and I kept looking at this, I marked it up right away. It's the roadside and or the lakeside in an L1. It's confusing.
Well, part of it is whether you're in the L1 district or whether you're on a lake. Since you can be in the L1 district and not be on a lake, if you're in the L1 district but not on a lake, then it's the roadside. I'm only repeating back to you what you said to me 20 minutes ago. but-
Exactly.
Are you trying to get phase B?
Yeah, right, exactly. So as it stands, it's correct with those words struck out because it's true that if you're on the lake, the front yard is the lakeside. So
Right.
the way you have it
If
with
your
those words struck out is
property
correct.
line is Adjoining to what?
Yeah.
That's your front yard.
And we explain that other places.
Yeah, I think your strikeout is correct based on what you said earlier.
Then we had cases where on West Shore, where the property was the same property with the road went through the middle.
Yep.
Right, they came back and built a house on the other side of the road, away from the lake. And we were requesting at that time to be rezoned, but you couldn't rezone until the property was split. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we had a little discussion there. I just don't want to see that problem. You know, if there was some way you should word that, because if it is for the road, I mean, there ought to be something written where, I mean, the front yard still probably would be the way, but their setback should be from the road.
Right.
Because you got two different things that we gotta look at, but, I mean, 25-foot setback might have to look.
Yeah, we would put Mr. Osborne into the creek, I believe.
Do what?
It would put Mr. Osborne's house into the creek, I imagine.
Pretty much, I believe.
Okay, so I'll get some of that cleared up and I'll put it into a much cleaner format
Yeah.
over time. The next thing I really want to discuss is, since we're still on ordinance updates, Article 3, and then ADU. So there's a subcommittee working on accessory dwelling units and detached accessory dwelling units. Made some nice progress on that. An amazing group of people from a wide range of different life experiences, so which has been helpful. On that note, it's likely I'm going to leave Culver at the end of the year because I'm going to be pursuing and running for the county recorder's job.
Thanks.
So with that, my question is, do you want me to keep working some on ADU and some on this? Or would you like me to focus more on one or the other? The existing ordinances or the ADU to put my full efforts into it as long as I'm here? Or would you like me to keep doing both? This will go a little slower. I am limited on time as a part-time employee for Culver.
My opinion, what little I have here, but I mean, I would rather see you spend your time as much on the ordinances that you're looking at itself, because I feel like right now we're a year and a half, 2 years behind when the comprehensive plan was done. We haven't made any changes to go in accordance with our comprehensive plan. I feel like we've done some things that we didn't look at the comprehensive plan before, so I think we need to go for it. That's just my opinion.
So I'm here to work at the direction of what all you would like me to.
So my question is, how far do you think we are from having an ADU ordinance that we could put in front of the commission. I mean, we had some difficulty scheduling meetings, and I plead guilty as well on that, but it seemed to me that we weren't terribly far away from having something that we could bring forward and discuss and possibly vote on.
So let me put some stuff together and
So I
send it
guess
out.
My question is, couldn't we do both if we're close on that one?
Yes, I can put something together and see, and if what everybody wants, what I have now
Okay.
in an ordinance form. We had our last meeting. We didn't have a lot of attendance, so we didn't have an official meeting, which they're just advisory
Right.
committee anyhow, but there was some extra discussion there. So I can put something based on everything I have together, an actual ordinance for everyone to look at. There's going to be a couple of big questions that pertain to that is, there's two schools of thought on special use or it being, I'll minimize that. On special use or if it should be permitted. There'll be something to consider, but you won't be able to, I don't think it's fair to ask that until you actually see what it looks like.
Right.
Only reason I was saying the other, not to contradict anything you said, because I agree. But I know if it was far enough along, because it's going to be up to the planning commission to approve as well.
Right.
Or review it, and then if we had to make changes, as whatever, to the board would decide. And I just thought if it was far enough along that we could probably handle ADU, and he could still work on our ordinance.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is I think we can do both.
Yeah.
Because my sense is on AQ, we're probably 2 meetings away, maybe, like one kind of here's what it looks like, some input back and forth. That then there is a following meeting, we got something that we're all comfortable with and
Right.
vote for.
And just to add to that, the perfect example, the case you're going to hear next month is for an R1 to go to R2, exactly for that.
Right.
And in this case that you're going to hear next week or next month is the person has a garage that already has water and sewer to it. The garage itself fits within all the setbacks on the property.
Mhm.
It was, somebody had some kind of business in it at some point. So I had the county building inspector, Chuck, he came down and went through it with me. And he's like, yeah, really not going to take much to turn this into an apartment. That's like the perfect case example for it because everything fits. There's no variances. The structure's there, things like that.
Yeah, and the case that kind of gave rise to this working group, the property on Lake Street was like, I think we were like, we would like to be able to help you. We just don't have a way to do it.
Yeah.
Without an ordinance.
Yeah.
So, and I can look around the lake and if there have been people that have skirted, that have 2, 3, I've counted up to 5 residences
Yeah.
that count as one because they're just connected by breezeways. And they're not enclosed breezeways, so that.
Our ordinance says it's part of the main structure if it's structurally connected.
Right.
That's it.
Structurally connected, nobody, 2 before.
In other words, you put a cover over your breezeway going between the buildings and they're structurally
Right.
connected.
Which that was done.
Which is, okay.
Which is further on in the other chapters that when we get to that, we'll clarify it.
So,
And my argument for doing the dwelling unit before the whole code revision, I agree with you, they both need to be done. It's just those people have been waiting to hear from us now for
yes,
a good period of time, and they seemed a little grumpy the last time they didn't hear back from us, so.
and we've got another case coming up.
And we're not, the ADU is not going to meet in July, but between July and August, I'll have something
Yeah.
done
Cool.
on that
Yeah.
in an ordinance form that then can be corrected to your liking.
Would we have to have that looked over by our lawyer before we try and pass it ourselves?
Not
So-
necessarily, but yeah, it'd probably recommend.
So the answer is, I would want to make it and have you all look and agree that you want it to send to the lawyer. Then it will go to the attorney. The attorney will do his attorney stuff. And then it'd come back here. So
Not required.
you can look at it at a meeting without voting.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, say, okay, we're comfortable, or we want to tweak this or that.
Just because it's a whole.
Okay,
And then the public has the opportunity to know what's going on also.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, that's how we'll move forward.
Okay.
On those topics, my stuff is done. Now it's up to you on your time.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got 2 or 3 other sections already prepared to bring to you,
okay,
but we'll do one at a time.
all right, that's good, cool.
Do we want to jump into comprehensive plan discussion? Okay.
Can wait.
So 48.
I like to add something that just won't take long at all, because after looking at everything we've done, I look back. I've been on this for long enough, and I tend to look ahead a lot versus back, because of that grandfather in, whatever first, But I was just thinking about when we did the storage up here on the corner.
Yep.
And I look at the comprehensive plan, and I'm looking at, as far as more development for more, building town up more. And I felt like now that we did this, we put it right in the middle where we got room to develop for more. And if we go ahead and develop, we've got it right in the center of where we want to develop more homes or whatever to go out.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but it's just like something that wasn't really looking toward the future as far as what the comprehensive plan was actually looking at. And that's it, I think looking at the comprehensive plan for the planning commission. That's all I have to say on that.
Were there more copies of?
What, the comprehensive plan?
Yeah.
I'm sure you can get.
But anyway,
Who needs one? How many?
I'll take 6.
I don't have, one. I could use one.
We need 1, 2,
No, I got none.
I've got 1. So I'll get 3 copies just to be sure.
Oh, you want to move on? All right, moving on. Citizen input.
My God, it must be me. Well, I don't want to disappoint anybody. Question that arose during the town council.
Private name.
Carrie Chess, 3520 South. Question arose during the town council meeting recently was the new adoption of a business at the corner of Main and Lakeshore fireworks sales. And whether or not that's something the town anticipated, or whether it's something that the town might consider acting on if it's not in favor of that. And using that as an example, going a step further, I just watched the local news a bit ago. Saw that Niles, Michigan has a stretch of highway 1 mile long and has already received and approved 21 applications for cannabis sale or equivalent. So I don't know if these kind of things have to be anticipated, or if there's enough buffer in our zoning that these would not be able to just be pencil whipped right through and approved without some scrutiny. I don't know what Indiana's laws are with cannabis, but obviously probably not as lax as Michigan. But if something like this were to arise and we have nothing to say you can't do it, are we protected in?
We're protected by law right now, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
If I
cannabis
could
is just
have it-
illegal, so.
So it's still federally illegal. And outside of that comment, I would say we would have to ask our attorney how well we're protected, since those businesses still can't use banks. As far as I know.
Well, it's illegal under state law. as well.
Michigan doesn't
So,
seem that problem.
Well, because it's not illegal, Mitch.
Yeah, the reason they're putting the Niles is so that people from Indiana can drive out there and, yeah, like when I was a grad student at Notre Dame and.
Well, we're surrounded on all three states, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois.
But referring to what you're talking about, comparing with the fireworks being done now.
Yeah.
I mean, we ought to have some say so, like you're talking about, as an example, Kansas. I mean, you could go as far as strip club, whatever.
Right.
You know, I mean, you would not want that in the town. And what you're saying, what you're looking at, we have nothing to stop that, right? I don't know what, I don't want it. Don't get me wrong.
You don't want a strip club in this town?
We
Maybe a
could
lot
go
of
further,
cadets
but
that would disagree with you.
I'm using it as a far-fetched thing, but you gotta look at what is allowed and what's not allowed. Who's got to say?
I think the old brick house
Huh?
the old brick house is zoned for that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, okay. We need to get that zoning changed, but, you know, I know you've got the counties, you've got even South Bend, whatever, they decide whether this area is correct for whatever. And do we have that?
That's our zoning. That's essentially what our.
But
zoning
for
is.
taking zoning, but I mean,
Basically,
our zoning. still
basically
you're
it's
talking
retail
about
sales.
business. You're not talking about what kind of it?
Well, that's what we're not
Yeah, it'd
allowed.
be commercial.
Like,
So,
if it's a commercial business and
it's
they're
a
not,
commercial business.
and they're licensing themselves with the state, we really
Can't
only,
stop.
yeah, as long as it's not a weapon or, age restricted.
Yeah.
So maybe you might have a way to say something about fireworks, because there is an age restriction. for
Right.
this.
But, I mean, it's no different than liquor store or whatever, you know, but what I'm talking about as far as a business that you're coming in catering to. Whatever,
They all
without
come-
saying anything wrong with whatever,
I don't know.
but we don't have the control to, I mean, you saw with Marshall County, they were out and didn't want some farm, whatever, they raised too many cattle or whatever, too many pigs for the chicken farm, I believe it was, whatever. And residents didn't like it there. And they did change, didn't do it, you know, whatever. But where did that authority come from? The county? Or, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Where is it written where they have the authority?
Yeah, the county has went specifically for the chicken coop case. They have specific ordinance that allows in agriculture you to raise chickens in coops as long as it's 30,000 or less. You know, a new one just went right outside our zoning district.
Right.
Here.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be a 30,000, but it's built to accommodate 40,000. Who's gonna count them?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not talking about as far as restricting
But
what you can have as far as, you know, you've got, or you can have chicken, you can have, it could be a pig farm, but it would have restrictions. But what I'm saying is, as far as in town, do we have anything to regulate that? If
You
somebody
can't
come up,
regulate something that's not legal. That's silly.
but
It's something you shouldn't even think about till the time comes.
and just
It's already
a
regulated.
personal
It's-
thought.
well, I'm not canvassing what it is,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about as far as any unapproved
Oh, like-
business
like-
would be,
Let's say, yeah, okay, a gentleman's club. We'll say.
you know, unaccepted.
There's things that could be prohibited, absolutely by ordinance. On the other hand, the fireworks sales. Just something to think about. Is it the loudest minority who's against it? And the majority of people who are okay with it are just quiet? Just kind of throwing that out there. It'd be interesting to know what their sales actually were to see if the people truly were in favor of doing business there.
But I mean, is it approved or unapproved? It's done and then want it taken back out. In other words, you don't approve it, now you have to have it removed. But is there something to stop from ever anything coming in the first place?
Herein lies where it would be nice and permitted
Mhm.
or not to be spelt out.
I think I'd let the politically elected folks make recommendations.
As far as coming before. Okay.
Well, on what should be regulated or
Well,
Right,
with the fireworks, Terry Wakefield presented this information and he didn't come out and say he was for or against it, but he brought it up as to in the context of if you think there's a lot of fireworks going on around 4th of July, get ready for more because, and he pointed to Wayne and Chad,
we've got more being sold, not only in our community, but right in our face. And so you can connect the dots and figure that Terry wasn't too thrilled about it, and I can understand why.
I mean, I'm
But
sure
if the
that's
police and the fire department aren't excited about something like this, but yet legality says they can do it, and that's something that maybe should be looked at within the community. The recommendations of the police department and the fire department should weigh heavily. Is this something good for the community? And if they say, we don't think this is a good thing to do, maybe they'll.
But right now, you're dealing with the sale, not knowing where it's gonna be used.
Absolutely.
But then it would be up to the town or whatever to restrict where it's used.
Well, they have enough
Which they
trouble.
already have.
And that's what Wayne said, is like, you know, we're already up 24/7 around that time. What's this gonna matter kind of thing?
Right.
And meaning they already have enough trouble policing what they got. And the reason I bring it up is I've got a 9-year-old dog who's absolutely petrified with fireworks.
I know.
And I sit in the basement with the music going for hours around 4th of July and whatever other holiday they might want. So it's my problem, nobody else's problem. But it just infuriates me when I see that they're encouraging the sale of these things in our town.
And with all due respect, though, it makes a lot of other people happy.
I know.
Yeah.
So it's one of those,
Yeah.
and on this note, so you know, I did call state fire marshal and had state fire marshal come in and inspect that place.
Yeah.
So they have all their proper permits and certificates.
As old gas stations go, it's a great place to sell
Right.
fireworks, yeah. And it seems to me there are two issues, and I don't mean to prolong this any more than necessary, but there are two issues. One is, as you say, the political branch deciding what things they would like people to be able to do or not do in town, and telling us, and we can then amend the list of permitted uses accordingly. And then the larger question of which things the state law allows the political officials to restrict or not restrict in the first place. In the case of Michigan, I think the people, I heard the same news article you did. My impression is that in the state of Michigan, the Niles Town Council couldn't stop them from selling cannabis if they wanted to, because the state law says you can establish a cannabis store and the local people don't have any control over it. In any case, I would say, first question is, do local officials have any control over this in the first place? And second question is, if there are local officials who do have control, there should be the politically elected officials who can make a decision and let us implement it.
Because it would be a highly.
I would have thought.
Just like tobacco.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as the fireworks goes, as far as like fire issue, it's not just fireworks. Because like Rochester, you know, when their fireworks building burnt,
Oh, yeah.
and they had a massive fire. But I know they were required to be that far out when they put the fireworks shop in there to start. And that was a very good reason, which it, you know.
I went there on my 18th birthday,
Oh, yeah.
which was the 4th of July also.
Oh, I don't think.
Bonfire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's an issue where I think as far as town council or whoever could regulate the position of that shop. You know, whether it should be right downtown or
Yeah.
in
And
that,
it's right next to residential.
yeah, it should be in separate area, you know, whatever.
Right next to funeral.
And, I mean, I can see where a lot of people would be concerned.
Or sprinkler.
Let's
But, I mean, you brought up a good point.
Carrie, what's your street again?
520 South Plymouth.
South what?
Plymouth.
Plymouth. Okay, thanks.
Any commissioner members concerns or input?
Yes,
Just recovered strip club. So.
the solar ordinance that we approved at the last meeting, I was in favor of because we needed some rules. We didn't have any. But I think that this ordinance needs to be amended, as I've talked about once before, that we have no ground mounted solar panels in the town of Culver, within the town limits, and maybe a couple of 100 feet out from any of the city limits. And maybe in the L1 district also. I'd like us to get going on that. What do we need to do to start, looking at that and adjusting the ordinance?
I would ask, Mr. President, if the board had interest in changing that. And if, I said I would ask Mr. President, if the board has, this plan commission has interest in revising that ordinance. And if so, what do you want me to revise? It's something the board has to discuss.
You'd almost have to, if you're, I hear how you're pitching it, but you'd almost have to let us fully know what you want to change. And then you present it before the commission. You can do it next meeting, or you can do it now if you want to take a little bit of time, but we're kind of wrapping things up.
But you could, I mean, it would have to come before a motion to amend and approve by a majority.
Yeah, so you bring it here and we discuss it. And then if you got over half the votes to try and bring this up, then we'll move forward with it. We can do a show of hands right now if anybody, like, so you have a general feel.
Or we have to bring it back. And
Yeah.
if you don't prepare for whatever you want to do, bring it before,
Well, what do you need from me?
whatever you need change.
What would you specifically like in detail changed?
Well,
I mean, are you talking,
bring that up very quickly right now.
well, if it's quick, you can bring it up, but you still need to preserve, I'm not critical.
No, that's fine.
I mean,
We can
procedure
talk
will have to
about
go
it
through
next
as far as
time.
you want to present whatever you
The
want to
next
present.
time.
And if we change that, would it have to be on the agenda?
It would be ideal if it's something that you wanted to put on the agenda, I would put it on there. So
I mean,
it'd be
That
Be
would probably
prepared
be
for
the protocol,
So
Because we'd have to,
have public hearing.
I was just saying, if you could go back and get your copy, and I mean, because I know people saying you need to be able to say literally which words you wanted to take out or put in.
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
which sections, like,
And then bring it up at the next meeting and we can vote on it.
If
we
your
can-
request to be on the next meeting,
Or on the agenda for the next meeting.
on the agenda.
I can, if you want it on next week's or next month's agenda, I'm happy to add that to the agenda.
Let's go
Or
ahead.
ordinance discussion.
I think
discussion.
it's important that we take another look at that.
Okay, we'll take another look at it, but I can't guarantee it's gonna be a quick vote or anything. Like you said, you want to get on top of it, so it's gonna be a slow process. So you're kicking it off tonight, but just letting you know.
All right, I'll-
Steve, can you email us a copy of that? With that,
I sure can.
I don't remember the details, like I know there was square footage.
Do you want the ordinance in its entirety with all the typo corrections, everything, or just the actual ordinances that'll appear in your zoning ordinance book?
What would actually appear in the time?
I would think probably the way it would appear. Yeah.
Okay,
And I don't think I don't plan on having too much change. But,
Well, as you say, it might, for instance, involve different things for different districts. I mean,
Yeah.
if the county wanted to put 12 acres of ground mounted solar panels out in the middle of nowhere, you might not care conceivably, or you might care. I don't know, but I'm just saying it might.
And it's pretty backyard, front yard.
Yeah.
Where you're looking
no,
at
it's
it.
not the things I want to see change.
It should be,
Because for the good of the
I
community.
think it should be that. I mean, for the good of the community.
Any other commission members' concerns or input?
What I'm-
I had one, and it should be a quick one. How's everything going with the access? The private drive and the,
okay, so the case where the plan commission's been sued with your name,
That would be the one, yeah.
with your name on it? Okay. There's, in short, I had time with our attorney before this meeting, met. We were discussing something else actually for the BZA. That's just hanging out there right now.
Okay.
So again, the hope is that the two parties come to some resolution on their own. But that hasn't happened yet. And in the meantime, they're still trying to see to get the town of Culver taken off of that. And that hasn't happened yet.
To just take the town of Culver.
And over big suit.
In other words, yes, leave us off and make it a civil matter between the two
Yeah,
parties.
The town, including us.
Yes,
No, have us removed from the lawsuit.
okay. Town of Culver, not Culver.
Well, it's actually, it would be have plan, the town of Culver Plan Commission.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was what we were interested
Your
in.
name could fit it.
That's, I want my name off.
That's Brad Puma, yeah.
They could take Kohler off, I'm not saying take Joel.
All right, if there's nothing else, then I say we are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Make a motion that we adjourn.
It's on the
I
agenda.
think we decided we don't need motions.
Yeah.
If it was